The alarm clock buzzed at 4:30 a.m., just like it had every morning for the past 20 years. Roberto rolled out of bed, his joints creaking like the old mining equipment he worked with every day. His wife, Maria, was already in the kitchen, packing his lunch into the same metal box he'd carried since his first day at the mine. 2 sandwiches, an apple, and a thermos of coffee strong enough to wake the dead. Outside, the Chilean desert was still dark and cold. Stars scattered across the sky like diamonds, the only witnesses to another ordinary day about to begin. Roberto climbed into his pickup truck, the engine coughing to life after a few tries. He drove the dusty road toward the Esperanza mine, where he'd spent most of his adult life digging copper from the earth. The mine sat like a giant wound in the desert floor, its entrance yawning black against the gray morning light. Roberto had always found something peaceful about arriving early, before the chaos of the day began. He liked the quiet moments when it was just him and the mountain, sharing secrets that had been buried for millions of years. Inside the main building, he grabbed his hard hat and safety gear. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in a harsh white glow. Other miners were arriving now, their voices echoing off the concrete walls as they prepared for another day underground. These men had become like brothers to him over the years. They shared the dangers, the backbreaking work, and the small victories that came with finding a good vein of ore. Antonio, the mine supervisor, called the crew together for the morning briefing. He was a fair man, someone who had worked his way up from the tunnels and understood what it meant to spend your days in the belly of the earth. Today, he had news that would change everything, though none of them knew it yet. "We're opening a new section today," Antonio announced, pointing to a map on the wall. "Level 7, Eastern Tunnel. The geological surveys show promising copper deposits. Roberto, I want you to take the lead team down there." Roberto nodded, feeling a familiar mix of excitement and caution. New sections always held possibilities. Sometimes you'd hit a rich vein that would keep the mine profitable for months. Other times, you'd find nothing but rock and disappointment. After 20 years, he'd learned not to get his hopes up too high. The elevator ride down to level 7 took almost 10 minutes. As they descended, Roberto felt the familiar pressure in his ears and the gradual cooling of the air. 700 feet below ground, the temperature stayed constant year-round, a cool refuge from the desert heat above. The other miners joked and talked during the ride, but Roberto was quiet, mentally preparing for the work ahead. The new tunnel smelled different from the established sections. There was something fresher about the air, mixed with the metallic scent of untouched rock. Their headlamps cut through the darkness as they walked deeper into the mountain, the sound of their boots echoing off the walls. Roberto had developed an instinct over the years, a sense for reading the rock formations and understanding what the mountain was trying to tell him. Today, something felt different. The rock patterns weren't quite what he expected from the geological reports. The layers seemed older somehow, more compressed, as if they'd been under pressure for an incredibly long time. He set up his equipment. At the face of the tunnel, where the previous crew had stopped their excavation, the rock here was harder than usual, requiring more careful work with the pneumatic drill. As he worked, Roberto noticed odd striations in the stone, patterns that didn't match anything he'd seen before in his decades of mining. "Hey, look at this," called out Diego, one of the younger miners. He was pointing to a section of wall where the rock seemed to shimmer differently under their lights. "Is that normal?" Roberto walked over to examine what Diego had found. The rock formation was unusual, with what appeared to be a metallic seam running through it. But this wasn't copper or any other mineral he recognized. It had an almost mirror-like quality that reflected their headlamps in strange ways. "I've never seen anything like this," Roberto admitted, running his gloved hand along the surface. The material felt smooth, too smooth for natural rock formation. "Let's clear away some of this debris and get a better look." As they worked to expose more of the unusual formation, Roberto began to feel uneasy. This wasn't following any pattern he understood. The metallic material seemed to continue deeper into the rock, following a path that defied geological logic. Natural mineral veins had certain characteristics, certain ways they formed over millions of years. This was different. After an hour of careful excavation, they had exposed several feet of the mysterious material. It wasn't a vein at all, Roberto realized with growing amazement. It was something solid, something with defined edges and what appeared to be intentional design. The shape was geometric, too perfect to be natural. "This can't be right," Diego whispered, stepping back from the wall. "How can something like this be buried so deep?" Roberto felt his heart racing. In 20 years of mining, he'd found fossils, unusual rock formations, even small meteorite fragments. But he'd never found anything that looked deliberately made, especially not at this depth. The geological surveys indicated that this rock formation was ancient, predating human civilization by millions of years. He reached for his radio to call Antonio, his hands trembling slightly. This discovery was beyond his expertise, beyond anything he'd ever encountered. The implications were starting to dawn on him, sending chills down his spine that had nothing to do with the cool underground air. "Antonio, this is Roberto. You need to come down to level 7 immediately. And you might want to bring someone from the geology department." "What's the problem, Roberto?" "Did you hit a gas pocket?" "No, sir. It's something else entirely. Something that doesn't belong here." As they waited for Antonio to arrive, Roberto and his team continued to stare at their discovery. The metallic surface seemed to pulse under their lights, revealing intricate patterns that became more complex. The longer they looked, whatever this was, it was about to turn their quiet mining operation into the center of a mystery that would capture the world's attention. Roberto had always been a simple man who believed in hard work and providing for his family. He'd never imagined that his routine job would lead to a discovery that would challenge everything scientists thought they knew about the past. But as he stood in that tunnel, 700 feet below the Chilean desert, he knew that his life had just changed forever. The sound of the elevator approaching echoed through the tunnels, bringing Antonio and the answers that would transform this ordinary morning into the beginning of an extraordinary story. Roberto took a deep breath and prepared to show his supervisor something that would stun not just their small mining community, but the entire world. The elevator cables groaned as Antonio descended into the depths of level 7. Roberto could hear his supervisor's heavy boots echoing through the tunnel long before he appeared in the beam of their headlamps. Antonio had been running the mine operations for 15 years, and Roberto had never heard such urgency in his voice over the radio. "Where is it?" Antonio asked, slightly out of breath from hurrying through the tunnels. His hard hat was askew, and sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool underground temperature. Roberto pointed toward the exposed section of wall where the metallic object gleamed under their lights. "Right there, boss. We've been working for 3 hours trying to understand what we're looking at." Antonio approached the wall slowly, his headlamp casting dancing shadows across the strange surface. He'd seen plenty of unusual things in his years managing mining operations, from unexpected fossil discoveries to rare mineral formations. But as he got closer to Roberto's find, his confident stride faltered. "Mother of God," he whispered, reaching out to touch the smooth metallic surface. "This is impossible." The object was clearly artificial. There was no question about that now. The surface had intricate patterns etched into it, designs that were too precise and complex to be natural. Under the bright mining lights they'd brought down, they could see that the patterns weren't random decorations. They looked functional, like some kind of advanced circuitry or technological interface Diego had been quietly working to expose. More of the object while they waited for Antonio. "Sir, you should see this," he called out. "It gets even stranger." They gathered around as Diego showed them what he'd uncovered. The object extended much deeper into the rock than they'd initially thought. What they could see appeared to be just one section of something much larger. Through a translucent portion of the material, they could glimpse what looked like internal mechanisms, components that seemed to pulse with a faint light of their own. Antonio pulled out his phone and started taking pictures, though he knew the images wouldn't capture the true strangeness of what they were seeing. How deep does this rock formation go? He asked Roberto. According to the geological surveys, this section of the mine cuts through rock that's been here for over 200 million years, Roberto replied. The compression patterns and mineral deposits all confirm that age, but this thing, he gestured at the metallic object. This doesn't belong in rock that old, the implications hung heavy in the tunnel air. 200 million years ago, the Earth was a completely different place. Dinosaurs hadn't even evolved yet. The idea that some advanced civilization could have existed that long ago, capable of creating technology this sophisticated, challenged everything they knew about the history of life on Earth. Antonio made a decision that would change all their lives. Nobody talks about this until we understand what we're dealing with, he said firmly. Roberto, I need you to stop all excavation work in this area immediately. Diego, go back up and tell the other crews that this section is off limits due to structural concerns. As Diego headed back to the elevator, Antonio continued examining the object. The more he looked, the more questions arose. The material itself was unlike anything he'd ever seen. It wasn't steel or aluminum or any metal he recognized. It seemed to absorb and reflect light in ways that defied explanation. We need an expert, Antonio said finally. Someone who understands geology and can tell us how something like this could end up buried so deep. Within 2 hours, Dr. Carmen Herrera from the University of Chile was driving across the desert toward the mine. Antonio had called the university's geology department, explaining that they'd found an unusual mineral formation that needed professional analysis. He'd been careful not to reveal too much over the phone, but Dr. Herrera was curious enough about the mysterious discovery to make the 3-hour drive immediately. When she arrived at the mine, Antonio led her down to level 7 without much explanation. He wanted her to see the object with fresh eyes without any preconceptions about what it might be. As they walked through the tunnels, Dr. Herrera chatted about various geological formations she'd studied throughout Chile. She seemed relaxed and confident, expecting to identify whatever unusual rock formation the miners had discovered. That confidence disappeared the moment she saw the object. Dr. Herrera stood in stunned silence for nearly 5 minutes, her scientific mind struggling to process what her eyes were seeing. She approached the wall slowly, pulling out various instruments from her equipment bag. She tested the surrounding rock first, confirming what the mining surveys had already established about the age of the formation. "This is impossible," she finally said, echoing Antonio's earlier reaction. "The rock formation is definitely ancient, but this object... She pointed at the metallic surface. "This shows signs of advanced manufacturing techniques that shouldn't have existed until very recently in human history." She began taking detailed measurements and photographs, her excitement growing as she documented the discovery. The patterns on the surface weren't just decorative, she realized. They showed mathematical relationships and geometric principles that indicated sophisticated understanding of engineering and design. "Have you tried to remove any portion of it?" she asked. "We were afraid to damage it," Roberto replied. "It seemed too important to risk breaking." Dr. Herrera nodded approvingly. "You made the right decision. This discovery could rewrite our understanding of ancient history. We need to proceed very carefully." As word of the discovery began to spread within the university's geology department, Dr. Herrera found herself fielding calls from colleagues around the world. She'd sent preliminary photographs to a few trusted experts asking for their opinions on the unusual find. Their responses were unanimous. Nothing like this had ever been discovered before. By evening, the mine site had been quietly cordoned off. Security guards were posted at the entrance, though they'd been told only that valuable mineral deposits had been found and needed protection. The truth was too extraordinary to share widely yet. Roberto and his crew were sworn to secrecy, though the weight of their discovery was clearly affecting all of them. They'd come to work expecting another ordinary day of mining copper, and instead they'd uncovered something that might prove they weren't alone in the universe. As night fell over the Chilean desert, Dr. Herrera continued her examination of the object using specialized equipment brought from the university. Each test revealed new mysteries. The material's atomic structure was unlike anything in the periodic table. The internal mechanisms visible through the translucent sections appeared to be far more complex than any technology humans had ever developed. The small group of people who knew about the discovery realized they were facing a moment that would divide human history into before and after. Whatever this object was, wherever it came from, its very existence proved that everything they thought they knew about the past was wrong. In the depths of the mine, surrounded by rock that had been undisturbed for millions of years, they had found evidence of intelligence that predated human civilization by an incomprehensible span of time. The discovery would soon capture the attention of the entire world, but for now it remained their secret, glowing softly in the darkness of the tunnel like a message from an impossible past. The secret lasted exactly 48 hours. Despite all the precautions, all the sworn promises and security measures, the story of what lay buried in the Esperanza mine began to leak out like water through cracks in a dam. It started with Pablo, one of the security guards who had been stationed at the mine entrance. He'd been curious about all the unusual activity, the university vehicles coming and going at odd hours, and the hushed conversations he'd overheard between Dr. Herrera and Antonio when he went home to his small apartment in the nearby town. Of Calama, he couldn't resist telling his girlfriend Teresa about the strange things happening at work. Teresa worked at the local newspaper, a small weekly publication that usually covered town council meetings and school events. But she had dreams of bigger stories, and when Pablo described the mysterious discovery and all the secrecy surrounding it, her journalist instincts kicked in immediately. She started making phone calls the next morning. First to the university, where she was told that Dr. Herrera was unavailable for comment. Then to the mining company, where a nervous receptionist insisted that everything was normal and there were no unusual discoveries to report. The more people refused to talk, the more convinced Teresa became that something extraordinary was happening. Meanwhile, down in the tunnels of Level 7, the investigation was expanding rapidly. Dr. Herrera had called in colleagues from 3 different universities, each sworn to secrecy until they could understand what they were dealing with. The tunnel had been transformed into an underground laboratory, filled with sophisticated equipment and computer monitors displaying data that challenged everything they thought they knew about archaeology and history. Dr. Rodriguez from the University of Santiago arrived with ground-penetrating radar equipment, hoping to map the full extent of the buried object without damaging it. What he discovered sent shockwaves through the small team of researchers. The object wasn't just a single artifact. It was enormous, extending deep into the rock formation in multiple directions. It's like we've only uncovered the tip of an iceberg, Dr. Rodriguez explained to the growing group of scientists. This thing could be the size of a building, maybe larger. We're looking at what might be an entire structure buried in rock that formed millions of years before humans existed. Dr. Chun, a materials scientist from Beijing who had flown in that morning, was running tests on microscopic samples of the mysterious metal. Her preliminary results were even more baffling than the object's impossible age. The material appeared to be composed of elements that existed on Earth but arranged in molecular structures that current technology couldn't reproduce. The atomic bonds in this material are unlike anything we've ever seen, she explained to her colleagues. It's as if someone took basic elements and found ways to combine them that we haven't discovered yet. The strength and conductivity properties are off the charts. As the scientists worked in growing excitement and confusion, Roberto and his mining crew found themselves in a surreal situation. They were still being paid to work at the mine, but their job had transformed from extracting copper to carefully exposing more of the mysterious artifact under scientific supervision. Roberto, who had always been a practical man focused on putting food on his family's table, now found himself at the center of what might be the most important discovery in human history. The stress was getting to everyone. Diego had been having trouble sleeping, his mind racing with questions about what they'd found. Antonio spent his days fielding increasingly urgent phone calls from the mining company's executives, who were growing nervous about the disruption. To normal operations, Dr. Herrera was working 18-hour days, driven by scientific curiosity and the knowledge that she was involved in something that would define her entire career. It was during this tense atmosphere that Teresa finally broke the story. Her article in the Calama Weekly was modest by city newspaper standards, just a few paragraphs speculating about unusual activity at the local mine. But in the age of social media, news travels fast. Someone photographed the article and posted it online with the caption, "What are they hiding at the Esperanza mine?" Within hours, the post had been shared hundreds of times. Conspiracy theorists and amateur investigators began descending on the small desert town, hoping to catch a glimpse of whatever was being kept secret. The local police, unprepared for such attention, found themselves overwhelmed by reporters, curious tourists, and self-proclaimed experts demanding access to the mine. The mining company's attempts to maintain secrecy crumbled under the pressure. Videos began appearing online showing the unusual number of vehicles at the mine entrance, the university equipment being transported to the site, and interviews with local residents who claimed to know about a discovery that would change everything. International news outlets picked up the story within 24 hours of Teresa's original article. Reporters from major networks began arriving in Calama, booking up every hotel room in the small town. The desert highway leading to the mine became clogged with news vans, tour buses, and cars full of curiosity seekers. Roberto found himself thrust into an unwelcome spotlight when someone identified him as the miner who had made the initial discovery. Reporters camped outside his modest home, shouting questions and offering money for exclusive interviews. His wife, Maria, was terrified by the sudden attention, worried about how this would affect their quiet family life. "I just wanted to do my job," Roberto told Antonio during one of their private conversations. "I never asked for any of this craziness." The pressure on the scientific team intensified as word of the discovery spread throughout the academic community. Universities around the world were demanding access to the site. Government officials were asking pointed questions about national security implications. Religious leaders were seeking statements about how the discovery might affect theological understanding of creation. Dr. Herrera found herself appointed as the unofficial spokesperson for the research team, a role she'd never wanted and wasn't prepared for. During her first press conference, held in the small conference room of Calama's only hotel, she tried to explain the discovery without revealing too much about its truly extraordinary nature. "We have uncovered what appears to be an artifact of unknown origin buried in very old rock formations," she said carefully. "We are conducting thorough scientific analysis to understand its composition and significance." The reporters weren't satisfied with such vague explanations. They pressed for details about the age of the artifact, its apparent technological nature, and the implications for human understanding of prehistoric life. Dr. Herrera deflected most questions, but her obvious excitement and the hints she couldn't help dropping only fueled more speculation. As the media circus grew around the mine, the scientific investigation continued in the tunnels below. Each day brought new discoveries that deepened the mystery. The internal mechanisms visible through the translucent sections of the artifact appeared to be functional, though no one understood their purpose. Energy readings suggested the object might still be active in some way, though it showed no obvious signs of operation. The transformation of the small mining town into an international center of attention happened with breathtaking speed. Street vendors appeared selling T-shirts with alien designs. Amateur scientists set up camps in the desert hoping to detect unusual energy readings. UFO enthusiasts arrived with sophisticated equipment, convinced they were witnessing proof of extraterrestrial visitation. Through it all, Roberto continued to descend into the mine each day, working alongside world-renowned scientists to carefully expose more of the object that had turned his simple life upside down. He often wondered if he should have simply covered up his discovery and continued mining copper. But as he watched the excitement and wonder in the scientist's eyes, he began to understand that some discoveries were too important to keep buried. no matter how much they complicated ordinary life. 3 weeks after the story broke worldwide, the small desert town of Kalama looked like something from a science fiction movie. Military vehicles patrolled the roads leading to the mine. Satellite dishes sprouted from every available rooftop. The local school had been converted into a temporary research facility, its classrooms now filled with computer equipment worth millions of dollars. Roberto barely recognized his hometown anymore. The quiet streets where he'd walked his children to school were now crowded with people speaking languages he'd never heard before. Scientists, journalists, government officials, and curious visitors from around the globe had transformed Kalama into an international hub of activity. The mine itself was now under strict security control. The Chilean government had declared the site a matter of national importance, while simultaneously agreeing to allow international experts access for research purposes. Getting into the mine required multiple levels of clearance, and Roberto found it strange that he needed special permission to enter the place, where he'd worked for 20 years. Dr. Herrera had been joined by some of the most brilliant minds in the world. Dr. Yamamoto from Tokyo University arrived with equipment designed to analyze materials at the atomic level. Professor Martinez from Oxford brought expertise in ancient civilizations and archaeological dating techniques. Dr. Petrov from Moscow came with classified technology originally developed for space exploration. The international team worked around the clock in shifts, each group bringing new perspectives and specialized knowledge to the investigation. The tunnel system on Level 7 had been expanded to accommodate all the equipment and researchers. Temporary laboratories had been carved out of the rock, creating an underground research complex that rivaled any university facility. Roberto found himself in the unique position of being both a witness to history and a guide for the world's leading experts. The scientists respected his knowledge of the mine and often asked for his insights about the rock formations and the discovery process. It was surreal for a man who had never finished high school to be consulting with professors who had spent decades studying the mysteries of the universe. The artifact itself continued to reveal new surprises as more of it was carefully exposed. The object was indeed massive, stretching deep into the rock formation in multiple directions. What they had initially discovered was just one small section of what appeared to be a complex structure. Using ground-penetrating radar and other non-invasive techniques, the researchers had mapped an underground chamber that defied explanation. Dr. Yamamoto's analysis of the metal composition yielded results that challenged fundamental understanding of materials science. The molecular structure is impossible according to our current knowledge, he explained during one of the daily briefings. The atoms are arranged in patterns that should be unstable, yet this material has maintained its integrity for millions of years. Meanwhile, Professor Martinez was studying the intricate patterns carved into the surface of the artifact. What had initially appeared to be decorative designs were revealing themselves to be far more complex. Mathematical sequences, geometric relationships, and what might be symbolic language covered every inch of the exposed surface. These aren't random decorations, Professor Martinez announced to the assembled team. This appears to be some form of information storage, possibly instructions or historical records. The complexity suggests a level of mathematical and scientific understanding that surpasses our current capabilities. The implications of these discoveries were staggering. If the artifact was indeed millions of years old, as the surrounding rock indicated, then it proved that advanced intelligence had existed on Earth long before the evolution of modern humans. The technology embedded in the object appeared to be more sophisticated than anything humanity had yet achieved. Dr. Petrov's energy readings added another layer of mystery to the discovery. The artifact wasn't just an ancient relic, it was still active. Subtle energy patterns flowed through the internal mechanisms, suggesting that whatever power source it used was still functional after all these millions of years. The energy signature is unlike anything we've encountered, Dr. Petrov reported. It's not nuclear, not chemical, not electrical in any way we understand. Whatever technology powers this device operates on principles we haven't discovered yet. As news of these findings leaked to the media, the world reacted with a mixture of excitement, fear, and skepticism. Religious leaders struggled to reconcile the discovery with traditional creation stories. Scientists called for careful study and peer review of all findings. Conspiracy theorists claimed the government was hiding even more dramatic evidence. Roberto's life had been completely transformed by the discovery. Media outlets from around the world wanted to interview the miner who had found the impossible artifact. His simple home was surrounded by reporters and camera crews 24 hours a day. The mining company had given him paid leave, both to participate in the research and to protect him from the overwhelming media attention. His wife, Maria, struggled with their sudden fame. She couldn't go to the market without being followed by journalists asking about her husband's discovery. Their children couldn't attend school normally because of all the attention. The family that had once lived quietly in the desert was now at the center of the biggest story in human history. "Sometimes I wish I had never picked up that tool," Roberto confided to Antonio during one of their rare private moments. "Our lives were simple before. We knew who we were and what was expected of us. Now everything is crazy and uncertain." Antonio understood Roberto's feelings, but he also recognized the magnitude of what they had uncovered. "This discovery is bigger than any of us," he said. "It's going to change how humanity sees itself and its place in the universe. That's a heavy responsibility, but it's also an incredible honor." The international research team was making progress in understanding the artifact, but each answer led to 10 new questions. The more they learned, the more obvious it became that they were dealing with technology that was far beyond current human capabilities. The implications for science, history, and philosophy were overwhelming. Government officials from major world powers had begun arriving in Calama, eager to understand the potential applications of the advanced technology. Military representatives wanted to know if the artifact could be reverse-engineered for defense purposes. Space agencies wondered if it might provide insights into interstellar travel. Dr. Herrera found herself coordinating between all these competing interests while trying to maintain scientific integrity in the research process. The pressure was enormous, with everyone wanting immediate answers to questions that might take decades to resolve properly. The artifact had also attracted attention from less welcome visitors. Treasure hunters and artifact smugglers circled the area, hoping to get close enough to steal pieces of the discovery. Extremist groups claimed the find was either a hoax designed to undermine religious faith or proof of their particular beliefs about ancient civilizations. Security around the mine had been increased multiple times, but the Chilean government was struggling to manage all the different pressures surrounding the discovery. International law was unclear about who had rights to study or control such a find, leading to diplomatic tensions between countries that wanted access to the technology. As the investigation continued, Roberto often stood in the tunnel looking at the artifact that had changed everything. The smooth metallic surface still pulsed with that mysterious inner light, holding secrets that might reshape human understanding of the universe. He thought about his simple life before the discovery, his routine days of mining copper and going home to his family. Now, he was part of something much larger, something that would be remembered long after he was gone. The weight of that responsibility was sometimes overwhelming, but as he watched the brilliant scientists working tirelessly to unlock the artifacts mysteries, Roberto began to understand that some discoveries were worth any amount of disruption to ordinary life. 6 months after Roberto first struck that strange metallic surface with his pickaxe, the world gathered to hear the truth. The United Nations had called a special assembly in New York where the international research team would present their final conclusions about the Esperanza mine discovery. For the first time in history, every major television network, radio station, and online platform would broadcast the same event simultaneously to an estimated audience of 4 billion people. Roberto sat in the front row of the assembly hall, still wearing the same simple clothes he'd worn to work that fateful morning. Next to him sat Maria, their hands clasped tightly together as they watched Dr. Herrera approach the podium. The woman who had once been a quiet university professor was now the most famous scientist in the world, chosen to deliver findings that would forever change humanity's understanding of its place in the universe. The past 6 months had been a whirlwind of discovery and controversy. The artifact had been completely excavated, revealing a structure that was even more extraordinary than anyone had imagined. What lay buried in the ancient rock was nothing less than a complete technological device, roughly the size of a small building, with internal mechanisms that operated on principles beyond current human understanding. Dr. Herrera began her presentation with the basic facts that the research team had verified through months of careful analysis. The surrounding rock formation was indeed over 200 million years old, confirmed by multiple independent dating techniques. The artifact itself showed no signs of decay or aging, suggesting it was designed to last far longer than any technology humans had ever created. The composition of this device, Dr. Herrera explained to the hushed assembly, contains elements that exist on Earth, but arranged in molecular structures that our current science cannot reproduce. The manufacturing techniques required to create this object are centuries, possibly millennia, ahead of our current capabilities. The audience listened in stunned silence as she continued. The patterns carved into the artifact's surface had been decoded by the world's leading linguists and mathematicians. They contained mathematical concepts that human science was only beginning to understand, along with what appeared to be star charts showing the location of Earth within the galaxy from an external perspective. Most significantly, Dr. Herrera said, her voice carrying across the silent assembly hall, we have determined that this device is not of terrestrial origin. The words hung in the air like thunder. Roberto felt Maria's hand tighten in his as the implications sank in. After months of speculation and theory, the scientific community had reached a conclusion that challenged every assumption about humanity's place in the cosmos. Dr. Petrov took the podium next, explaining the energy readings that had puzzled researchers from the beginning. The device was still operational after millions of years, powered by a technology that seemed to draw energy from the fundamental forces of the universe itself. More importantly, it appeared to be some kind of communication device designed to transmit signals across vast distances of space. We believe this device has been sending a signal for the entire time it has been buried, Dr. Petrov announced. A signal that indicates the presence of intelligent life on Earth. The revelation sent shockwaves through the assembly. If the device had been signaling for millions of years, then somewhere in the galaxy, other intelligent beings might know about Earth and its inhabitants. The implications for human civilization were staggering. Professor Martinez presented the team's analysis of the symbolic language found on the artifact. After months of work by the world's best codebreakers and linguists, they had managed to translate portions of what appeared to be an instruction manual or historical record. The messages contained within this device tell the story of a civilization that visited Earth millions of years ago, Professor Martinez explained. They left this beacon as a marker, indicating that this planet had the potential to develop intelligent life. The device has been waiting, monitoring, and reporting on the evolution of life on Earth. Roberto listened to these revelations with a mixture of pride and overwhelming responsibility. His simple discovery while mining copper had revealed that humanity was not alone in the universe. More than that, it suggested that other intelligent beings had been watching Earth's development for millions of years. The final presentation came from Dr. Yamamoto, who had spent months analyzing the technological principles embedded in the artifact. His findings were perhaps the most extraordinary of all. The device contained what appeared to be a complete database of advanced scientific knowledge, including technologies for interstellar travel, energy generation, and communication across galactic distances. This discovery represents the greatest advancement in human knowledge since the invention of writing, Dr. Yamamoto stated. The technologies contained within this device could solve our energy problems, enable travel to other star systems, and answer fundamental questions about the nature of the universe itself. As the presentations concluded, world leaders began to address the assembly about the implications of the discovery. The President of the United States spoke about the need for international cooperation in studying and applying the new technologies. The Secretary-General of the United Nations announced the formation of a new international organization dedicated to managing humanity's response to this first contact with evidence of extraterrestrial intelligence. But for Roberto, sitting in that grand assembly hall, the most important moment came when Dr. Herrera called him to the podium. The man who had spent 20 years mining copper in the Chilean desert was invited to address the world about his discovery. Roberto had never spoken to more than a few dozen people at once in his entire life. Now, with billions watching, he walked slowly to the microphone. He thought about that ordinary morning when he'd gone to work expecting nothing more than another day of routine labor. "I'm just a simple miner," Roberto said, his voice echoing through the assembly hall and across the world. "I went to work that day to provide for my family like I'd done every day for 20 years. I never imagined that picking up my tools and doing my job would lead to something like this." He paused, looking out at the sea of faces representing every nation on Earth. "But I want everyone to know that this discovery belongs to all of humanity. It doesn't matter that I found it or that it was buried in Chilean soil. This message from the stars is for everyone, everywhere." The standing ovation that followed lasted for nearly 10 minutes. Roberto returned to his seat, where Maria embraced him with tears in her eyes. Their quiet life in the desert was over forever, but they had become part of something much larger than themselves. In the months that followed the UN announcement, the world began to change in ways both subtle and dramatic. The technologies derived from studying the artifact led to breakthroughs in clean energy, medical treatments, and space exploration. International cooperation reached levels never before seen in human history. As nations worked together to understand and apply the alien knowledge, the Esperanza Mine became a UNESCO World Heritage Site, visited by millions of people each year who wanted to see the place where humanity first learned it was not alone. Roberto and his family were provided with a comfortable home and financial security, but more importantly, they were honored as the people who had given humanity its greatest gift. Roberto often returned to the mine, now transformed into a research facility and museum. Standing in the tunnel where he had made his discovery, looking at the artifact that still pulsed with mysterious light, he reflected on how one ordinary day had changed everything. He had gone to work as a simple miner and had ended up helping humanity take its first step toward joining a larger galactic community. The signal from the device continued to broadcast into space, carrying news of humanity's technological advancement to whoever might be listening among the stars. And somewhere in the cosmic darkness, other intelligences might be preparing to answer that ancient call, knowing that Earth had finally developed beings capable of understanding the universe's greatest secret, that in all the vastness of space and time, no world is ever truly alone.